Hey everyone, welcome back to Frosty's Abronias, a channel dedicated to all things Abronia. In today's video, we're going to talk about why I chose Abronia over other reptile species and why you might want to as well. Before going into why I chose Abronia over other species, I want to give you a little bit of background as me as a keeper and my journey into reptile keeping. I've always been interested in animals since growing up, but I never actually kept reptiles until college when I got a gray tree frog. It was my first reptile I've ever had, in this case, an amphibian, but it was definitely an introduction to the world of bioactive keeping and natural environments and stuff like that. I started getting into things like Serpa design, where they create naturalistic enclosures and stuff like that, and it really drew me into the reptile world, being able to have a slice of nature in my life. I come from a computer science and tech background, so for me, I'm pretty much locked up working on a computer all the time, and so I wanted some part of nature to be a part of my life, where if I can't get outside and do things because I'm working all the time, then I can at least have something that's a part of nature around me, so I can get fresh air, I can smell them, I can check it out and be able to experience that nature side of the world without actually having to, you know, leave my home sometimes, which sounds super reclusive now that I say that out loud, but I swear I go out and I touch grass, I swear. Moving on, the other species I've worked with are crested geckos, axolotls, and frogs. Mostly gray tree frogs and currently a Cuban tree frog. Now, I've always wanted to work with a specific species and really dedicate my time to it. I know a lot of people who create videos of, check out my reptile room, and they have 20, 30 different reptiles. While I think that's okay, personally, I don't think I could give an animal or reptile 110% care if I had that many. I think I would only be giving like 80 or 90 at the max, maybe giving a couple of 100%. I prefer focusing on one species and becoming really knowledgeable in that species and giving them 110% care. Like I said though, I do have other species. I have my axolotl, which was a rehome from somebody else who needed to figure out a situation with it. They were in a situation where they couldn't keep it any longer due to aggressive breeding. They thought they had two males and they had a male and a female, and it was starting to attack the other one, and they didn't have space for another enclosure. A friend of mine reached out to me to let me know about the situation, and I took it in. The crested gecko is actually the only reptile I've purchased other than the Abronia, and I've had for a couple years now. It was actually my first introduction to reptile keeping, and I've had that for 3 or 4 years now, and have had that for a decent amount of time. And then the Cuban tree frog that I have, which I got from a plant shop in town where I was buying plants for these guys actually, and they let me know that they had this frog and they didn't know what to do with it because they can't release it. And if you know anything about Cuban tree frogs, they're highly invasive in their natural ranges, or unnatural ranges in this case. So they can't release it. They didn't know what to do with it. They want to keep it in the greenhouse. And I said I would take it in, and I have a little enclosure for him in my room as well. And they're all doing well. They're all doing healthy, but I always wanted to focus on one species. And so I was doing a ton of research into what kind of animal do I want to work with? If I'm going to work with one animal and really focus on it, I really want to find something that I love, that I think looks really cool, has all these different features that I want. And, you know, what is it that I want as a keeper? What do I want to work with, and what intrigues me? So moving on to what makes Abronia stand out. Firstly, they have this dragon look. I've mentioned this in other videos, and anybody who talks about Abronia pretty much mentions these things look like dragons, and there's very few species of reptiles that are out there that look like that. It's a very unique look, and they come in a wide range of colors across the different species of Abronia. Even within certain species of Abronia, they have ranges of colors. If you look at Lythrochilla versus Graminia versus any of the other ones, there's definitely different nuances and colorations and even ocular horns compared to other species. So there's some specific color variation you're looking for, a specific look you're looking for. There's probably a species of Abronia that fits that color profile and that look that you're going for. So having that range allows me to, you know, kind of get that itch of, if I want something that looks a little different, I just need to look into potentially working with a different species of Abronia in the future, which I do hope to do, is expand what species of Abronia I work with. I am going to take my time and wait until I have a full room for that, due to the fact that I want to make sure I have a quarantine area for them, just to make sure that these guys don't get sick and have plenty of space and the capability to handle them. Another thing is their arboreal lifestyle. I like the way arboreal enclosures look, generally speaking, and give you that variation. I've never been a huge fan of the terrestrial side of reptile keeping. I'm never really into those species personally. They've never really intrigued me. I like the verticality that it provides and the variation in plants that you can have in the bottom versus the top, and the vining and that kind of stuff. While you can do that in terrestrial enclosures, especially if it's a larger one, for me, the style of arboreal enclosures just really hit that itch where it is kind of what I personally wanted. Another thing that makes them stand out is they're definitely a unique species where you don't see them very often. While that's not the reason I got into them, is they're the super unique, hard to come by species, they're definitely something that when you show people, it definitely gets their eyes open and goes, what is that? And I'm always excited to tell them about them, tell them about where they come from, you know, how they're endangered, and, you know, their environments and that side of stuff. So being able to work with the species that isn't widely known definitely gets people intrigued about species and conservation as a whole, which is always exciting to see when you show someone a cool animal and they're like, what is that? And it intrigues them. And, you know, let me show you these cool things to bring you into this world and educate you more about this world. And that's kind of like what I'm hoping to do with Abronia, of being able to show these guys off to you, bring you information about them, care information just about the species in general, so that you are better knowledgeable about them, and then you can take that information out into the world and do good things with it. Another big thing is, due to the environment, they're very much cloud forest species. I grew up in a more desert environment, so for me, I've always been more interested in the, you know, cloud forest kind of setups and the way those enclosure looks. Same thing with any sort of forest environment, where I've always enjoyed those kinds of enclosures compared to, you know, your desert setup. For me, I grew up out in the desert. I've seen enough of it. I can, you know, go out and check that out, go home and see it, and it's more than plenty for me. I've grew up with it. I don't need an enclosure that also looks like it personally. So for me, having a more, you know, unique environment niche setup that is something I don't get to see in person often or ever is something that really I was like, this is really cool to work with. This is really cool to see and create my own little, you know, ecosystem. Another thing is I wanted something that wasn't too big or too small, but had like a nice, good medium size to it. I didn't want something as big as a monitor, but I also didn't want something as small as like a crested gecko, where it's not really handleable with the worry of its tail falling off. I wanted something that was hardy, but still not too big and has to be trained to be able to handle. And Abronia hits that nice medium size of a reptile for me. They're not too big, they're not too insanely hard. I can manage them, I can get them out of their enclosures without too much work. There's no threat of me really getting bit. If they bite me, it has broken the skin in the past, but it's been very minimal. And the only time they've actually bit me was when I first got them and had to take them out of their enclosures to the vet, which they were not happy about. But can you blame them? They had just been shipped and brought to me, and I was soon after taking them to vet to be prodded and probed to make sure that they didn't have any sort of illnesses or parasites. So otherwise, they haven't been, you know, you don't have to worry about them biting you. You don't have to worry about them really being aggressive towards you for the most part, as long as, you know, you respect them and you look for those cues of not, you know, aggression cues where they're not gonna, you know, bite you if you're not too careful. They're also pretty intelligent species compared to some other species. Some are super intelligent, like monitors, for example, where they have to be trained and worked with. However, they are intelligent enough that they understand food responses and spot training, so you can work with them, you can handle them, but not at the same degree as you would like a bearded dragon or a tegu or a monitor lizard. So it gives you that nice little in-between where if you want to handle them on occasion, or if you want to kind of let them be, it gives you that flexibility where you don't feel like you have to be working with them or providing them a ton of activity all the time like you do with a monitor. However, I still, you know, give them plenty of enrichment. I actually plan on doing enrichment really soon with these guys and updating their enclosures even more, which I'm excited to do, to just give them something more to explore, something new to check out, and that kind of thing. Now, I also want to talk about the challenges of keeping Abronia. Due to the fact that there is different challenges you will have to overcome, and challenges that I was facing when I was first getting into Abronia. I actually almost didn't get into Abronia due to some of these challenges. First off, they are not a beginner-friendly species. I've talked about this in my care guide, but due to the fact that they are so unique in their environment, they haven't been worked with a ton, and they aren't, you know, super stress tolerant, you kind of have to learn to work with them and learn key aspects before getting them. Another thing with that cooler temperature, like I've mentioned multiple times, is another key aspect. You have to keep them cooler. So if you're not able to keep that room cool or withstand the cold with them, it's something to keep in mind that you might be better off at looking at for something like a chameleon or some other kind of reptile where they can handle those warmer temperatures. I know people who live in Florida who thought about or tried keeping Abronia just felt like they were unable to keep their rooms cold enough for that. So if you're one of those people who was thinking about getting into Abronia, and why I chose Abronia, you have to also keep in mind that the temperature could set you back. Also, if you're looking into a reptile that's super handleable where you can like pull them out of their enclosures all the time and work with them, you're definitely not going to be able to get that with Abronia. I personally don't grab my Abronia at all. I don't, you know, reach in there and pick them up. I know people who do that with their bearded dragons, their monitors, and other species of reptiles and chameleons as well. Personally, I can't reach in there and grab them. They'll skitter off. However, I can and have worked with them via spot training and can get them to move around and come to me, especially if there's a food reward available. They'll come and hang out, and they'll actually crawl on my arms and check me out and hang out occasionally, but it has to be on their terms. It's definitely not one of those species where you go, hey, this is my cool Abronia, check it out, and you bring it to somebody, compared to other species where you might be able to do that. Another challenge of getting into Abronia is their legality and their availability. Due to the fact that they are often Sites 1 and Sites 2, which I have talked about before, they can be very hard to get, especially, you know, captive bred ones that come from people you trust and are reliable within the Abronia community. So getting them is very hard just at a matter of fact level, compared to something like a bearded dragon where you can go to any pet store. Please don't go to Petco and PetSmart and buy your reptiles. Please go to trusted breeders and stuff like that. I'm not gonna go too far into that. I'll let you guys do your own stuff with that, but please buy from reputable breeders and such. You're not gonna find them, you know, on any reptile expo. You're gonna have to very much go out of your way to find them. Another aspect about that is the availability is usually really low, meaning the cost is really high due to the fact that people love to look at the species and how amazing they are, and you know, all the different things I love about them, and I've explained in this video, is other reasons why other people want them, which drives up the desire for them. And since there's such a low availability of them and not a ton of people working with them currently, it also means it drives up the price, which means these guys aren't the cheapest reptile to get. We're looking anywhere from 15 to 2 grand sometimes, 1,500 to 2 grand sometimes, or even more I've seen in cases. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're, you know, thinking that it's something you'll be able to get for a relatively affordable price, I'm sorry to tell you, that's just not gonna happen. So moving on to the last thing, was it the right choice to get Abronia? And for me, yes, absolutely was, for me, 100% the right choice. I wanted to work with one species of reptile for the rest of my life and really get to be knowledgeable about them. And I'm so glad I've done it with Abronia. They have so many aspects that I love. Yes, they have their challenges of being very hard to keep, very hard to get, you know, very hard to work with at times and be able to care for. However, those challenges have made me appreciate the species even more. I've learned so much about them. I've learned so much about the reptile community and met so many people because of it. And I think it's been an amazing time working with these species. I love coming into my enclosures, seeing these guys out. I love the way that they hunt for their food and the way they interact with me. They're definitely a species I love, and I cannot wait to work with more Abronia in the future. I think they're an amazing and underrated species with unique look and unique personalities that you just can't find in any other reptile species, in my opinion. I would 100% choose them again over any other reptile species out there. I have thought about keeping other species. I personally won't be keeping any other species other than the reptiles I currently have. I'll be caring for those for their entirety and keeping more Abronia. So for me, yes, it was the right choice. Now, would I tell someone to get Abronia or encourage them to do so? It really just depends on if you understand what it means to keep an Abronia. There is a ton of hurdles and a ton of things you gotta fine tune compared to any other species. Again, not a beginner friendly reptile, and it's definitely something you gotta keep in mind with the ethics. You know, this is a CITES 1, CITES 2 animal. Many of them are endangered, and if you're not comfortable with that, I totally respect and understand it, and they're probably not for you if you're still worried about that. Maybe wait, you know, 5-10 years when there is a much larger captive bred populace and multiple generations of Abronia. A lot of Abronia are still in the, you know, first and second generations where they haven't been bred a ton. Our knowledge is still growing even yearly right now, where the information is still changing. How people kept them, you know, 2 years ago versus how they're keeping them now is widely different, and it keeps on changing. So if you're not comfortable with, you know, changing your enclosures or changing your care, you know, over the next couple years working them, I would hold off on working with Abronia for the time being until more people have worked with them. You have more reliable, easy way to get them. And then in that case too, since more people will be working with them in the future, the prices will probably come down and you won't have to worry so much about getting wild caught ones. As long as people continue to work with the species, you'll continue to see that trend moving forward. So would I tell you to go out and get a Abronia? Probably not. I think 9 out of 10 people, probably Abronia isn't right for you. However, if they are something you are interested in, make sure to check out that care guide. Make sure you check out the Discord, the Reddit, and stuff like that, and ask the questions that you need to ask to learn about the species. I think they're an amazing species to work with, and I think you would have a great time working with them. I just don't think for most people it's the right animal to keep. While they look amazing and a lot of people want to work with Abronia, I think until we get everything fine-tuned and figured out and have the availability of them come up and the wild caught populace come down in the US and other countries as well, I don't think there's something for most people to get. However, if you're interested in keeping them, again, check out those sources. And, you know, I'm not gonna tell anybody, no, you can't keep Abronia. I just wanna mention that it's, for most people, it's probably not realistic and probably not the best idea. However, if you're a diehard fan for them and you really, really wanna work with them, make sure you're doing your research. And I think you can have a great time working with them. They're an amazing species, and I definitely think you should look into them more if you're really that interested in them. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video on why I chose Abronia over any other reptile species, and I hope you all are doing well. Take care. Peace.